All right, I think we have a quorum, so let's go ahead and get started. Ms. Mosher, you want to do the roll call, please?
As soon as I get this started. Sue Burton,
Here?
Laura Bellum,
Present.
Matthew Crutcher,
Here.
David Harrington,
Here.
Gary Waters, Christopher Westerman, Elizabeth Gooden,
Present.
Alice Kelly.
Here.
Solomon Ashby is not joining us today.
No.
Derek Challenger.
Present.
You are correct, Madam Chairwoman. We do have a quorum.
All right, great, thank you. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at the minutes?
I'll make a motion they be adopted.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Second. All right, thank you, Mr. Waters and Crutcher. And so the minutes are approved. Do we have any applications for retirement? Did any get appended that I didn't get a chance to see?
2 minutes. We have Terry Dale is vested. Deborah Poulin is vested. And out of fire and police retirement systems, we have Michael White, who is retiring effective June 1st. There are no reported deaths. I made sure and double-checked our active participants. We have 20 in fire and police, 20 in Portsmouth Supplemental, giving us a total of 40 active members.
Just too even.
2020.
I double-checked it because that was a
20,
little
huh?
strange to me, so I did double-check.
We're a dying breed, right?
Well, you know that. Any comments, questions?
Did we have an update for Poland, Debbie Poland?
I have it.
Okay.
We need to go into closed session now.
Oh, okay.
I don't have the paperwork, but if we're going to go in, okay.
Okay.
We can the closed session.
Yes. First, I want to make this motion first. I move to go into closed meeting as allowed by Virginia Code 2.2-3712 pursuant to the applicable exemption, Virginia Code subsection 2.2-37.5.1 and 2.2-3711A1 for the purpose of discussion of personnel records containing information concerning identifiable individuals as relates to eligibility for retirement benefits. I think we need to have a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So,
All right. So we're going back into open session and going into the application. We received an update. Do we want to make that official so that everybody knows what's...
yes, the effective date of retirement for Deborah Poulin is November the 1st, 2014.
Yes, sir.
And that's the date. That's also the eligible date for retirement. That's my understanding. That's when you turn 60 years of age, that time period.
Yes, sir.
And I would assume that the back payments for retirement benefits will be paid to you minus the applicable taxes. And I would assume that will be done by John Hancock.
Correct.
Yes.
So you're good. Good.
May I say something, please? I did receive the application form back on May 16th, at which time I did fill the part out, took it back to the city HR, but have not received the benefit election package yet.
I'll find out for you.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
So I'm sorry, John Hancock's going to issue that?
The
Yes.
check?
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, are we ready for the recurring business reports? Or was there anything else in the retirement? I think we covered everything, I'm just checking. Okay, thank you.
I want to thank you all very much.
You're welcome.
Last month, and it is attached on here, you do have the March updated one. As you may or may not recall, I had a formula error when I moved it to top and bottom so that the print was actually legible. I'm not going to go over the March numbers. I will, however, go over April. Year-to-date, beginning balance, $229,753,100.33. Interest income, $2,494,857.03. Administrative expenses, $300,360.35. It is so large in April due to all of those late invoices we had for John Hancock that were all approved. That's why that number is so large in April. All of those have been caught up now. Return of benefit payments year-to-date, $12,652.64. Recurring benefit payments, $25,445,663.29. Employer contributions, $6,593,236.42. Realized loss of $16,207.90. Unrealized gain of $17,316,507.38. Leaves us with an ending balance of $230,408,122.26. Puts us about at the same point where we were last year at this point in time as of April 30th. The change is we have a lesser amount this year of $1,515,956.68.
Any questions? All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we move on to unfinished business. There's been an investment committee meeting that I guess we will receive a report on.
Did you want me to?
Sure.
Or one of you gentlemen.
The investment committee met this week. Chris Westerman was in attendance. And just so you all know, his wife had a baby last week, and that's why.
Oh,
Exactly.
wonderful.
Little baby boy. And that was his first child. So. But we all were there, and we talked. We didn't have any investment advisors on the phone because we were talking about the investment advisors, and basically we talked about the investment advisors and we talked about the implementation plan. Previous meeting, the board voted to change the allocation plan based on Greystone's recommendation, and so Greystone came up with a plan to move those funds in a methodical but reasonable method. They wanted to start in June, and we had proposed, why don't you start July 1st? That way it's the beginning of the fiscal year, so you have one ending and then the next beginning. And so they will do July, August, and September. They will do 3 movements of the investments to get them reallocated. The other thing we talked about, and the board doesn't have to vote on that, it was just information, and we put that in the packet if you wanted to look at how the transfers were going. The other thing we talked about, and the board does need to make a decision, is investment advisors. We have Arlie Pritchard with Morgan Stanley, who has been acting as our investment advisor, and then we also have Greystone, who has also been acting as our investment advisor. And we have with John Hancock a fee schedule where a financial intermediate, I can't say this word, financial intermediary fee of and the fee we pay for that is 0.035% of the total plan assets. And so we provide to John Hancock that amount to pay whoever we designate as our financial advisor. And we also are paying to Greystone through Schaefer Cullen a fee, which is basis points of how much is in Schaefer Cullen. And Greystone has signed an agreement that they were acting as a fiduciary financial advisor to us, in addition to being part of the Schaefer Cullen group and the money manager for that. And the consensus was we only needed one financial advisor. And David or Matthew, if you wanted to speak up, Greystone seems to have more of a pension and a forward-looking perspective, and has basically the ability to manage pension funds stronger than Arlie Pritchard and Morgan Stanley have. Now, they're both under the Morgan Stanley umbrella, and get that clear. Morgan Stanley is a large company with a lot of different companies underneath it. So Greystone is a company under Morgan Stanley. Arlie works for Morgan Stanley, so it's just one big umbrella.
We kind of, I'm sorry,
Go ahead, yeah.
we kind of felt like he may have the skills, he may have the knowledge and the ability to do that. It just seems like since, not Greystone. Greystone took over or has started providing us with a lot of this information. Arlie kind of took a back seat and hasn't really provided much of anything that we believed that he should be providing to us.
What we say is where we discussed how Greystone stepped up. When after the study and some other things come up, we decided against or changing the vehicle investment of the insurance that wasn't really in our best interest. Greystone is the one that stepped up and put forth plans, according to the study, which was, advised by the study. And we just felt like they've stepped up. They're willing to continue doing what they've been doing through Schaefer Cullen until we get a new advisor, and they liable apply for that to be our advisor.
And that's so what we wanted to do is do a two-step and make a recommendation to do a two-step. One, just have one investment advisor for
Right.
now, and do an RFP starting in July, and do an RFP that is not just based on the plan's assets, but do a fixed fee and maybe a portion of it being a commission or bonus type thing. And so we were going to look around for RFPs to see how other investment advisors have been procured from defined benefit plans for localities. We do have an RFP that never really went out that the city had, but we do have others from other cities. I think someplace from Georgia that was we just happened to look for something and found something a couple days ago. And so wanted to take the best of both worlds, but put an RFP out and then have it solicited no later than 45 days or 30 days or 45 days, and then get somebody on board September, October. So, and have a signed contract and not have it as part of John Hancock can have obviously would have to work with them, but they don't have to be part of the John Hancock group. They can be a separate advisory.
The discussion was, part of the discussion was about how we compensate them, whether it's fee-based, whether it's based on a percentage or based on a flat fee. So we kind of talked about it, and there was some discussion about a flat fee, but then some kind of incentive for them to do better for us, for our system, to help us make more money than we are right now. And that's what we're talking about.
And one of the things is, we're a closed system, although our assets only, I think it was 231 million last year and 230 this year. Obviously, that's going to go up and down based on investments, but really, eventually, it's declining. And so, the longer we go, the more we'll decline, just because we have people well, I think it'll go up a little bit and then decline, because we'll have a few more people retire, and then everybody's going to be retired, and then people will
Deceased.
die. There's no easy way to put that.
Yes.
So there'll be fewer and fewer retirees that we will be paying, so your assets will eventually decline. So if you have an investment advisor paid on the percentage of assets, it just gets less and less. So there's no incentive there to spend time on the particular plan. Greystone also, this is the niche they're in. I think they talked about a triangle, that there's different advisors. There's the regular advisor for people that are just buying stocks or buying. Then there's the wealthy people, and there's a little bit more niche to that. And then on the top, there's institutional investing firms that manage large pension funds or manage uber large wealthy people, Donald Trump type wealth. And so that's the firm, that's their firm. And there's a different level of skill, especially when you're doing a defined benefit plan, than a defined contribution. And so, they have that. Now, I'm not arguing, we just happen to have them with our Schaefer-Cullen. One of the things I think you pointed out, Mr. Harrington, is that, they're recommending reducing the Schaefer-Cullen, and they've recommended it right off the bat, and they've taken it down. Well, that reduces their fee dramatically, from going from 90 million to 30 million into that fund. So we need to do something differently, though, and we need to have them as an investment advisor, not necessarily the tool to get into Schaefer-Cullen for them. You look like you had a question. That's right.
So, okay, so will the RFP is to replace Arlie?
I think it's to open up all possibilities
Right.
and then allowing him or not to
Anybody can apply.
apply.
Okay.
And because it appears now that there's no formal signed contract with Arlie, and
I can't find any.
yeah, so at least it's not like he's necessarily being terminated, but at the same time, we're putting it out there with the RFP to get more of a firm that would align with our particular investment strategy and our situation.
So if he applied, we would not accept him?
Not necessarily.
Not
I mean, there'd be a process. There'd be a
What we would
process they have to go through.
qualifications in our RFP, and the qualifications, some of them might be what size investment portfolio have you managed? Have you managed more than one defined benefit plans? That type of the qualifications of your firm.
So, okay. So right now, we are paying Greystone
Through the Schaefer.
through the Schaefer-Cullen and Arlie through John Hancock. And John Hancock through directly.
Right.
So will this then we'll still be paying 3 different entities or people?
We're paying John Hancock to administer our pension
Right.
benefits.
Right.
To do our actuary services.
So that's more of an
I
administrative
mean, I have the contract
cost.
here, and actually, what I'd like to do is send out the contract to everybody. We have ongoing services that we pay John Hancock for: administrative services, actuarial and compilation services, trustee and retiree administrative services, engagement and education services. And it helps to on page 4 of all the different things. Then we have optional services. And so the optional services might be data conversion service or investment-related services, actuarial consulting services besides just their annual report, non-standard services and additional services. So under additional service, we have one-time event benefit calculations, or the quadro orders per qualification is $950. So when they do things that are in the optional, we're paying them based on our contract here. And then the ongoing services is the basis points that we pay them 0.065% of our total assets. So they get 0.065. Then we also have, if we wanted to have a financial
Intermediary.
intermediary fee, that's 0.035%. We could say we don't want that and just have our own financial advisor and not pay John Hancock.
So did the investment committee make recommendations there as well?
Well, I think what we said is we wanted to go out for an RFP to determine an official and have a signed contract with an investment advisor firm, and not have it all just based on plan assets, have it a combination of a fixed fee and maybe a percentage of the assets to incentivize the results.
That last thing, 0.03 something for advisor investment?
Right.
What was that?
That's Arlie's percentage.
Okay, so
That's
that's,
about $80,000 a year, maybe a little bit less. Maybe
That's what we
75,
discussed.
75 or 80,000.
okay.
For Schaefer Cullen, we pay them a fee to be in their fund. And part of that fee goes to pay the, I'm not using the right term, the broker that got us into the fund, that reviews the fund and gives us advice on that fund. That is Greystone. And before that, there was a different name for the company. There was a gentleman that came here.
Yeah, it used to come and say,
Yeah.
I don't remember.
His name offhand.
Right.
So in order to get into the Schaefer Cullen Fund, we had to go through I want to say a broker, but it might not be that might not be that. And Greystone is that broker. And part of paying the Schaefer Cullen, we pay a percentage fee for that broker, which right now, I can't remember the exact percentage point, but it's basically about $167,000 we're paying Greystone to get into the Schaefer Cullen fee. So we're paying 0.10, I think it is, to get into the Schaefer Cullen strategy. And part of that is to pay Greystone. So Greystone is providing a fiduciary responsibility to analyze Schaefer Cullen. And what they said is, this is what we do anyway, and so we will be more than happy to help you with your regular pension fund, not just the Schaefer Cullen portion of it. And that's what they've been doing in the past few months. When they heard the Davenport study that said we needed more pension investment strategies with a larger firm, I don't know if they said larger firm, but they said a different type of firm, they stepped up to the plate and started working together.
So that fee won't change.
That fee won't change, but it will, the percentage won't change.
Yeah.
But as we reduce the amount that we put into Schaefer Cullen, that will change.
That'll start going down.
That'll start going down.
Right.
And, Greystone has said, that's okay, that's, we're here to provide the service. And they've done the hard part anyway. They've done the asset allocation, now it's just the moving. But I think the investment, and Chris was on board with this, is we really need to go out and select the firm that we want, not necessarily just stumble into Greystone or stumble out into Arlie. I think it's important to do a formal RFP. And what we do in an RFP in government typically, and we would recommend, the retirement board doesn't have to follow this necessarily, but I think it would probably be best to do the process. But you do an RFP, you put the qualifications, then you have a committee that ranks those qualifications, you do interviews with your top 2 to 3 candidates, and then you make a selection and make a recommendation to the retirement board. And that's how that typically works. So Arlie can definitely apply. He may or may not meet the qualifications. If he meets the qualifications, then you rank, and then you determine who you interview. So he could come up to the top 2. I mean, it's not like...
So the RFP will be, those who apply via the RFP will be submitted to the board, and then we'll give it to the investor.
I think the board probably would select an RFP or an investment the RFP committee to select.
Right,
So
I was
you don't
going to
have
say, in the past, I mean, the investment committee could
That's
probably
what I was
serve
heading.
in that particular role. Back in the 80s, when I was on, we went through that process, because back then, we were flushing money, and we only had one firm, and we decided we wanted more than one. So we went out and interviewed several, and I think we ended up with 2 or 3 investment firms that took care of our funds at that point. But again, there was a committee that went through it, and the committee also worked with the RFP to make sure it was shaped in such a way that we were getting, exactly what it was we wanted to steer ourselves towards. And then the process because it does have to be posted for a certain amount of time. And then the committee would probably rank and then bring the top 2 or 3
what I was
to the whole board to interview and have a presentation, et
That's a
cetera.
great way to do it. That way the committee does the paring down, and then the whole board can review the whole.
That's a good process, I think.
So the question is, are we formally going to give Carly a notice?
If that's what the board wants.
That's what we discussed then, and as from the investment committee, that's what I would recommend to the board.
I think that's the
I think that's a good
appropriate
courtesy.
thing to do.
And I don't know what industry standard is.
Well, I was thinking 30 to 60 days.
Yeah.
I think Chris said typically investment advisors, he gets cut off that day.
They cut off, yeah.
I don't necessarily think that's
I
what we
think
want to
30
do.
days is
I think
good.
30 days would.
30 days, yeah, sounds good.
I think that's reasonable.
So he would get paid through June.
Right,
What's
so
today? June 6th,
Yeah.
8th, excuse me. June 6th.
do we need a motion on that?
Yes. No.
I would say so.
So I move that we give Harley Pritchard from Morgan Stanley a 30-day notice to let him know that we're discontinuing our service with him and to get approval for a new RFP.
I second it.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Okay. And a nice letter.
Thank you.
We will draft something and we'll have you run by you soon.
Okay.
Actually, it probably should come from you.
Right.
You or the executive secretary, whichever. We'll draft
Okay, we'll work on it.
something. Okay.
All right, are we ready to move on to the governance policy?
Yes.
And is that the bylaws you're essentially calling?
Right. So we changed it to the bylaws. We had distributed this last meeting, and Ms. Burton had a couple of comments on it. And then one of the things that you commented on, it was kind of interesting. I took a straw man from a different board, and so we have been working with that and trying to pull things together and read the code and did that. But then have been working on it for a few months, and the treasurer in another board, and Ms. Burton brought up, well, should the treasurer be the same as the executive secretary? Should be that member of the board? And Mr. Challenger said, well, in the code, the CFO does all of this funds. So I need to change that portion a little
Okay.
bit, because that's really need to add the code language of what the treasurer is and
I
what
think
they
that's-
does. And maybe it's.
Because I think we've made the assumption.
Right.
That
and
in a
well,
sense.
and it is in the code that way, so I need
Right.
to change that section.
Okay.
The other thing is, and as I said, we did a draft of this, we sent it out to the board members for your comments. It really needs to run through legal, and I don't know if Human Resources has really looked at it either. So we wanted to make as many changes to it as possible based on your comments, and then give it to the city attorney's office and let them make sure it's all legal.
I saw one or two other things I wanted
Sure.
to ask about. And, okay.
And we can add to this, I think the other comment was procedures for employees for whatever records we can't find, or do we want to have that in our bylaws of appeal process? We can add to that if we needed
Okay,
to.
the appeals process.
And I'm sorry, I interrupted you as you were.
That's okay. Annual meeting, which according to our bylaws would be today.
Right.
How do we,
And that's why I actually have that highlighted,
Yeah.
because
How
we
do we
haven't been
just-
doing that.
do we just announce it as this is our annual meeting and, I mean,
Well, I think
what's
once
the-
it's in the bylaws, and then perhaps when it's given to the city clerk, I mean, she can add that particular word for June.
And I don't know what an annual meeting is supposed to be.
That's
It
what I'm
is in
saying.
the
There's
city
some
code
some
that you have an
distinction.
annual meeting, but I don't know what what the purpose of that is.
Since we have them
That was-
monthly.
Well, we've
Since
been
right
having
now we have
monthly
them
meetings,
monthly.
and then they say you have an annual meeting.
But in a lot of cases with the board, that's usually when they have an election of officers, or, yeah, right. And
should we say
or, you
that?
know, end of the year, or the possible end of the year status and things like that. So,
Okay.
because I think now, when are our elections? Have they been in June, or have they been in the fall, I
I
thought?
thought it was more like September.
Yeah,
was
September,
too.
October.
If I remember right, it was June or July that we talked about it, and then the next month we came in with who was gonna, or who was interested, and then September was the vote.
So we
So
may need to,
change that.
well, I mean, if,
Distinguish the annual from any other meeting.
or we could just add the, you know, add the little language that says where annual election of officers are held, and whatever else we want to include
Okay.
That
in
sounds
that
good.
particular meeting.
I was trying to see. I think it's in the city code that the annual meeting is in June. That's why I put it that way. And we can definitely change city code if that is the will of the board. I should say we can suggest to city council to change the code.
Right. Well, my only concern would be if it is the annual meeting, and it's in June, you do not have time to have your end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, you do not have your financials
Reports.
until December.
So, you know, perhaps,
September, October would be better. Is that what you're suggesting, Sue?
well, yeah, I'm just questioning whether or not that might be more appropriate. But what did you just say? You said December? I mean, that's not the fiscal year, though.
That's the end of the fiscal year, and so you have an audited report at the end of the fiscal year.
In December?
So the fiscal year was July.
That's what I thought.
The fiscal year ends June 30th,
Okay.
and then you go through the audit, and the audit's not typically done until December. The retirement board does not have its own separate financial statements, so you have to follow with the city's financial statements, and those are not typically done until November. They're required by law to be presented to the auditor of public accounts November 30th. So typically, they're done right around Thanksgiving, and they're presented to city council in first week of December or so.
At the risk of sounding smart, do we actually have an auditor now?
I'm sorry?
The risk of sounding difficult, do we actually have an auditor?
The city
Sherry
does.
Beckhart does the entire city. We don't have a city auditor.
This is
but we have-
external auditor. This is not internal
Okay.
auditing. The external auditor comes in and reviews your books. And so we have that. We've had Sherry Buckard for 3 years now. And,
I think you've had them for longer than that. But, or you've had them before, because I know
right, this
I
contract is the
used,
third
I
year
used
of
to
this
put all the
contract.
annual reports in the history room. Well, would it make sense then to have the annual meeting in, say, January? Or do we need to have the end of the fiscal during a June
Well,
meeting?
we do, honestly, we do financial updates every month.
And we have the quarterly investment
Right.
presentations.
So if annual meetings, if we wanted to put in there something about annual meetings strictly being for board members, elections or whatever, then I don't see why that would need to be changed necessarily. Just added that that's what the annual meetings are for. I mean, I don't know what different information we're going to get other than what we get monthly, financially at least, except an audit or two, whatever.
Well, and the presentations too that they do, they usually do a end of the year and a fiscal update for us. So we would get that from whoever our investment manager, broker is, correct? So why don't we just then add, if everybody's in concordance, that we leave what the city code has and not worry about changing it to a different month.
I'm trying to find it. It says, the board shall elect a chairman and a vice chair among its members. It shall also appoint a secretary who may or may not be a member of the board. It doesn't say when.
I like Sue's suggestion of adding there, and Matthew, the election, and that distinguishes it from the other meetings, and June is fine.
Sounds good to me.
Do we need to vote on it, or it's just discussion, right?
I think this is still discussion on the actual bylaws themselves and getting the, everything included in it that we want included, because she said she would go back if we wanted to have something about the appeals process or in the bylaws, since it's not apparently anywhere else, and then you'll probably be crafting some of that language for us. My
HR.
only, did you have any other questions? Because
Yes.
I only had, you go ahead and finish yours, because I've got mine written down.
Okay. The other thing I saw is under special meetings. It says that, let's see, at such special meeting, no business shall be considered other than as designated in the call. But if all the members of the Board of Trustees are present at such special meeting, and any and all business may be transacted at such special meeting.
Yeah, it's kind of contradictory
Yeah.
there. It's kind of like,
I think it says, this is what I interpret it, is if you say, the call says, we're going to discuss X, but everybody's here, you can discuss X, but you also can discuss Y and Z if you want to.
It doesn't say anything about having a quorum at that special meeting either.
This is if all members of the Board of Trustees are present. Oh, never mind, you're talking about just at the special meeting.
so in other words, like, you couldn't make motions or
Right.
vote or anything else.
Right.
You could only discuss if you didn't specify in there that if a quorum is,
Well, we could put something in on to that effect.
I understand what you're,
Yeah.
yeah.
Why have a special meeting if
If you
do
can't
something?
make any decisions that are,
Right.
Yeah.
binding.
Legitimized.
It's advisory only maybe, or something. Yeah, but it makes sense.
You can send that out by
The only
email.
time we really have ever done this that I know of is if we didn't have a quorum and somebody was trying to retire and we called a special meeting.
We have had them at least once. I don't know what we were doing, but
We had one back in, I believe it was August of the past year, because when I had to send everything out to the auditors, I had 2 sets of minutes for the month of August, I think it was. And it was because we didn't have a quorum and we had
Right.
several people who wanted to retire. And at that time, we thought we had to have board approval.
Right.
So we had a meeting where we had the quorum, and I think that meeting lasted us maybe 20 minutes.
right.
And it might occur if there was a snow day or, some kind of an emergency on the date that
Exactly.
we had selected. That could happen.
So we'll put in something about a quorum for the
Okay.
special meeting, that we need a quorum at least.
And on that same page, this is, I mean, I know we don't do it, but if we're going by the formality of the bylaws, it says that voting by the Board of Trustees on all resolutions and motions coming before it shall be performed by roll call. Can we change that to just by majority or something? We don't do that. Yays and nays entered in the meetings, minutes. I mean,
I'm sorry, I don't see what she's talking about. Where that is.
manner of
Page
voting.
5. Page
Oh,
5.
helps look in there.
Oh, okay, I was still on 4.
Manner of
Okay.
voting.
On the new ones, it's on page 5, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Say that again then, I'm sorry, Laura.
Well, I said, it says here that it's a much more formal process when we vote.
Sure.
It says that she has to do a roll call, and then it has to be recorded how each member of the board votes. And I'm just saying, I mean, we don't need all of that, do we? Or if we do, then we need to do that.
Yeah, because I know that's how council,
And actually,
Does
it's at EDA and PPIC, the other two boards that I know,
So
I mean,
we
they do a
need
roll
to start
call
doing
and-
this?
I suppose so, if we decide that we want to include it in our bylaws like that.
Yeah, do we, I mean, I think that's overdoing it.
I think so too.
I think it is a lot more formal than we would necessarily. I mean, I think you can just say with
Majority.
yays and nays entered in the minutes.
Yeah.
How does that sound? And
I mean,
just-
normally we put in that which individual
Motion,
made the
second.
motion, who seconded it, and then we usually put that it passed.
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
what,
I mean, we
how
don't
this
even.
should read.
Yeah, we just say, you know.
I agree.
Everybody, you know, we just say
Okay.
that it was passed because I've been doing this now about a year, and nobody here has ever said no.
Well, but there have been some
Yes, there have been
occasions
some
when
no's.
somebody has, but now that all the meetings are recorded also, if anybody wanted to go back
They
and
can find
actually see, they could.
I mean, if there was a case
have
where
any
there was a no,
recommendations, sir?
that would be reported.
I don't have a particular recommendation. Mr. Ashley is the quote-unquote parliamentarian of our office. But obviously, this is something that we can be discussed
Sure.
as we go along because she's going to send us the entire document for our approval, and I can make sure we discuss that particular issue when that happens.
Okay.
And see whether or not that's a requirement versus something
That's a
that
practice.
is something that doesn't have to be done.
Okay.
So we want to put it in there that the way we're doing it now, and if you guys have an objection, is that
Yeah.
right?
We'll move
Okay.
it back.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let me see, I thought I had one more thing. Oh, yes, under conflicts of interest,
Page,
page 6.
got it?
Says the city clerk distributes the forms twice a year, and the board members are required. We only get it once a year,
We only
don't
get
we?
it once a year.
I mean, that's more than
It's
enough.
required to do twice a year now.
We only
So
get it
that-
once.
That's changed very recently though, so maybe that's why you haven't gotten it the second time.
Okay.
Although I think it changed last year. So
Okay.
Let me check with her
Okay.
to make sure.
Yeah, I saw that too, and I went, twice? Okay.
It got changed.
My only other question on page 6, and I understand that this was language borrowed by the legal department, is the use under prohibited interests. It's about the sixth sentence.
therefrom.
Therefrom
Oh, I think
as
Derek, you
are
said take it out.
authorized.
Yeah.
That's an official legal term.
No. No, I didn't draft.
I mean, it's a silly little point, but, it just doesn't read well to me. It's
I
just-
agree.
Okay.
You didn't take, maybe you wrote the conflict of interest. I thought you had written the prohibited
No.
interest.
Okay.
I'm
How
sorry.
does anybody else feel about that therefrom?
And as I said, I took a straw man. from
Sounds like
another-
Shakespeare to me.
Yes, we'll take that out.
Wherefore, therefrom.
Therefrom.
Yeah,
I was trying to make it sound right in my head, but.
I
okay.
got it.
Now that I
Anybody
know
else
Derek
have
didn't
any
mind,
other?
Take it out.
Yeah, I think when Laura talked about adding something in here about the appeals process, I think we should. And it's my opinion that since it is our duty to make sure that people get the benefits they've earned, I think we should list in that section what type of evidence,
That they're required to bring to
Right, or-
the board.
what we've seen in the 6 or 7 whatever instances that we've had. So we're looking at what, tax records, we're looking at Social Security records, any
Hardly
type
anybody's
of
gonna
city
see
records, pay stubs.
That might be a level of specificity that we kind of hard to predict in advance because all these situations come about because that you're talking about because there are not any records that the city has. And I mean, I guess you could list some stuff there.
You can use it as examples.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can use that as examples.
Yeah,
But I don't
examples
think
may
it can be
include-
conclusive that these are the only ones that you can produce because I'm not sure what evidence they will have to support that they were working at such and such a place. And I wouldn't want to preclude anyone from trying to produce those documents that they have. I mean, 'cause, like, even though it's, a lot of these things are way past. Like, we had people from 73 to 83. You could have people have actual payroll stubs. Even though you have to be a very meticulous person to keep something for 50 years. So, they could have anything. I don't even know 50 years ago exactly what type of payment they were receiving. I don't know if they were receiving a check. I don't know how they got
Cash.
cash.
Can I make a suggestion? We're kind of close to being done with the bylaws. What I'd like to do is have them as is and then have maybe a section that says appeal process for retirees to be added in the next
a
3
later
months
date.
or just something, just so we can get it and vote on them. Because I think this process and writing this appeals is going to take human resources and the city attorney, and it might take some time. And I know we were trying to at least get bylaws approved, and it's up to you all. I mean, if you want to just keep them in draft and wait and we'll have the whole thing.
I'd rather it be completed.
Yeah, I would
Okay,
too.
that's fine. That's fine.
I mean, we've been
So,
working on
I
them
mean-
for 3 months.
And if we have a
What's 3
draft,
Well, actually, probably longer than 3
Yeah.
months. I think you've gotten it for 3 months.
Excuse me.
No, I know. No, I hear you. I was like, hopefully, it won't take 3 more months.
And I didn't mean to say that those were the only examples. What I meant was, or those are the only things that we can
Well,
accept.
legally,
Several
you can say
examples.
all other is required by the board, kind of.
So in other words, just provide an illustrative list of types of evidence that could be produced.
yeah, or examples
limited to.
include da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Because
Okay.
I think they do that for like voting, possibility, bring this, that, or the other, at least 2 are required, or, except we wouldn't necessarily say that. Because it could also include verbal,
Well, somebody presented one time the letter from a judge. I mean, I don't think we did anything with it, but.
Right.
I mean,
You never
that
know.
Yeah.
that
It's all sorts of
remembered
stuff.
that they worked at that particular time,
Right.
so.
Not to stretch it any further, but appeals process. And then I believe, and I'm thinking of the Humes example, that there should also be like a limit on the time frame of a second appeal, because they came to us more than once. Like after the first
Appeal once,
decision,
you appeal
then they
twice,
only
appeal
have
third
60
time.
days to, or 30 days or 60 days to, appeal again, a final appeal, so we can at some point just
Be done.
be done with it. And they don't just keep coming back with more evidence and pieces of paper.
Or maybe there's just one appeal. Maybe that you appeal once, so much like the grievance procedure. You get the 30 days and move on from there. Because
Well,
otherwise,
people might have, when they come before us and we tell them, well, this might be sufficient or that might be another
Okay.
piece
Social
of
Security might
information.
take some time to get.
So I think that's why I suggested a second.
okay.
Yeah. I think that's probably a good idea because we don't have any, and just like they don't have any control over Social Security. We've got a guy that does some volunteer work with some of the elderly, and he sits down at the Social Security office for days on days just to get a face-to-face with somebody, and even then it's not helpful. So I haven't tried that personally, so I'm going by what he says, but I only imagine that that's a difficult.
Or even the IRS, sometimes that takes a long time too.
Yeah.
Not 30 days might not be.
Sufficient. Are we done making suggestions for her inclusion? All right. Let's move on to frequency of meetings. I read a little bit of the discussion that you all had about that. I mean, I know we've kind of gone back and forth. What do we have as a recommendation, generally speaking, from the board?
I don't have a strong feeling one way or another, monthly, and then if you know you're not going to be here, you let us know. I mean, or if we don't have anything on the agenda, no meeting. I mean, we have that option except for our annual meeting.
Right.
Right, I mean, I would think it's better, instead of doing a definite no to this, no to that, it could change year to year. It could be that we have nothing on the agenda and they put some out.
Yeah.
There's nothing on the agenda and everything was voted on last month.
I agree.
There's no investment committee, no investment meeting. Let's wait till the following month.
Yep.
So our decision is no change?
Well,
Or
Is
our
it
decision-
specified?
I just think
Now,
that
in the-
we don't, it doesn't say we have to have a meeting every month if we don't have anything to
Oh.
discuss and vote on.
so I guess we would need to try and
What do our
discuss.
bylaws say?
They're not adopted yet.
Because it's going to get to a point where
There's not going to be
there's not going to be
very-
anybody to discuss except
Right.
for the funds, the issue with the investments.
You'll always have investments, and you'll always have actuary.
Right.
Right.
You'll always have the contribution to the city, from
Sure.
the city, and you'll always have the financial statements. So you'll always have those pieces. Once everybody retires, or there's very few retarees, sometimes you're going to have oddball situations where
Right.
people come up and said, I should have been retired. But you might, there's going to be, John Hancock's contract expires. Do we want to go out for another RFP? There are always things to do, but
Right.
not necessarily monthly things to do.
Right.
Maybe if we put something like within 7 days of the next meeting or within 10 days of the next meeting, if there's nothing on the agenda.
Or
then
no retirements or investment.
Because because we have to do the public notice, so we have to have time enough to do that, 3 days notice, right?
Yeah.
Which brings me back, I'm sorry, to
Bylaws.
the bylaws. Because it says here up to a maximum of 2 terms of office. Should we add anything? Because, we know the trouble we have getting members. Are we automatically going to kick a member out because they're at the 2-year maximum when we don't have a replacement for that member?
It's a good question. I don't think that's such a
Well,
wise
city
idea.
council appoints the membership, so it's really not up to the board to make that determination. And that is actually in city code, that it's a 2-year, not 2-year, it's a 2-term.
2 terms, which is 8 years.
But it says, or until their successors are elected and qualified up to a maximum of 2 terms of office, which almost gives you a little bit of wiggle room if there's nobody out there in the waiting room, that people could stay on.
Okay, maybe I'm
But
reading
that
it too
also,
strictly.
it also could mean that, we just really need to, if there is a maximum of 2 terms, 8 years, that halfway through the second term is about when we need to notify council and make sure they get started working on things. Because it's been over 2 years since or 3 or 4 years, I think, since we've had a full board. And that's a long time to go.
Well, I'm coming up on the end of 2 years, 2 terms next year. I've been on since 2010, I believe.
I'm into my second year of my second term.
I think I'm about the same, honestly.
Yeah.
We're all going to
I'm with you,
disappear.
Dave. I think I might have been a couple of months after you. But I think I may have been appointed for a term.
Lifetime.
No,
Forever.
no, for somebody that left the
Left.
board and then
Completed a
came on,
Ms. Mosher, do you think that you might be able to get us that information?
Yes,
Okay.
I can provide you that at the next meeting.
All right, thank you.
Oh, yeah, when our terms are.
Oh, I still have my official letter. And I was one of those ones that kept pay stubs for a long time. I opened up a desk the other day and I'm like, what are these doing here? Oh,
I
my.
still got one for at least one per year since I've been on.
Uh-huh. All right.
Sorry.
So we kind of, as a we came to a conclusion, so to speak, about the frequency of meetings, that we'll keep it as it is, but if we decide that there's not going to be anything pressing on an agenda, that we'll just decide we're not going to hold a
And that's been
meeting.
done in the past.
Right.
That's been on the past since I've been on the board.
Sure.
Yeah.
At what time should we do that, though?
I mean, you were talking your 7 or 10 day
Yeah.
notice, yeah.
Well, and you usually try to send out the minutes like the Friday
Seven,
before
prior to the meeting.
the, prior
Yes,
to the
ma'am.
meeting. So I would think certainly that Friday, I mean, if you're still waiting or you haven't heard anything from HR, that we can make that determination.
Yeah,
Who would-
HR,
who would
the
make
agreement
that?
was that they would get the retirement information to me the week before the meeting. So I would know that a week in advance,
So
be able to send something.
that would be up to you to make that call.
I think so.
Do you still have an agenda meeting the week before?
No, not anymore. It wasn't anywhere in anything. So she sends the agenda to me ahead of time and the minutes to take a look at on that.
Talk if we need to.
Yeah,
No, we
and then
don't
that Thursday, but we don't sit down
Right.
and meet since there's,
We could if you'd like, but
just means another trip
yeah,
downtown.
you don't need to. if you're-
I'd be okay with that. And I don't know if we want to put that in the bylaws or what, or if we want to not address it.
I don't think it's anything that
I don't think
needs
it's
to be addressed in the
necessary.
bylaws.
You know, and if I'm not available, Laura can certainly make the decision too, so. Okay, are we ready to move on to record retention policy?
um,
I got about 5 minutes before I got to go.
Yeah.
We, in finance, have records for new paper file records of retirees that have deceased. And we're required by law to keep those for 50 years. It's 50 years. It used to be less, but now it's 50 years. We also have records of binders of policies and minutes and just different things that happen through the years. They're in boxes and whatnot. So we're starting to organize some of those. We've met with DOMA, who's an organization that the city has used in other departments, to see if we can organize that. We'd like to, for the policies and the things that, minutes of meetings, we'd like to keep more of an official electronic system for those. For the records for the employees that have deceased, DOMA has suggested that's not worth the money to have an electronic
Digitized.
copy of it for something that you may go into once in a blue moon. And so we have organized those alphabetically in 5-year time frames and put them in boxes, and so we have those organized. I didn't think year to year was the right, so we did every 5 years, and so every 50 years from now, obviously less than 50 years from now for some of them.
Above sea level?
Sorry?
Above sea level?
Yes, they're they're on the 5th floor actually in a locked room, which is not where they're going to be permanently placed, but we'll get there. It has folks' social security numbers, and you just, even though they're deceased, you still want to protect that.
It's on
They are
Ancestry.com.
organized now, which they weren't, because they were all over the place in file cabinets in different places, which was a mess. But however, we have another meeting actually tomorrow. We were trying to do it before this meeting, but we couldn't. So tomorrow DOMA's coming and talking about how we should organize the other stuff, the stuff we might, 10 years ago when we invested in this, why did we do that? Let's pull out the minutes. So I think you had brought that up a while back, and so we are working on that. And Human Resources, I don't know if you wanted to talk to what you...
Just kind of what I said, we started doing our actual active employee files, I believe July of 2016. All the retirement files that we had in our possession, all of them are, electronic. So as far as retirement files, we don't have anything that's in a paper format. and the plan is prospectively, let's give an example. So for Matthew or for David, whenever you guys retire, let's go back. We'll talk about Michael Smith. So what happens with him as we get his retirement paperwork, how we have our DOMA file situated with each employee, especially more so for sworn fire and police, we have a file that contains your personnel file. We have your civil service file. Also, I'll just do all of it. We also have your medical file. Your medical file is the only person in my office who has access to those is Darlene, so I don't even have access to those. That just takes care of your privacy in that regards. And as each member goes and retire, we recreate the retirement file. The rationale, of course, for keeping the file separate goes back to the Americans with Disabilities Act from 1990. Medical files have to be separate. We have access to those retirement files as it relates to HIPAA and PHI and benefits. We keep all that information separate. So going prospectively, there won't be any paper files. We'll be able to look up either one of you. If they need a personnel file, we have that. If it's a retirement file, we have that. If it's your civil service file, we have that. And if it's your medical file, we have that. So that's kind of our record retention process moving forward. And it works out well. That way we don't have to worry about, storage issues. DOMA is a very reputable company. They actually do a lot of the medical files for a lot of the medical facilities, CHKD, and there are some others. As far as people's access to it, you have what's called a main administrator. Like, for example, for all the HR-related files, with the exception of medical, I'm the administrator. So I would have to grant somebody's access to be able to go see that file. So it also takes away, somebody who's in your office, you can go look through somebody's personnel file. And so we keep it that way. It's easier for if someone needs something, we can print that out. So let's say, Sergeant, you came and said, hey, Liv, we need a copy of a medical file. You go see Darlene. That's something we can easily produce. And we have the ability to update those records. So it works out really well for us. It takes care of all the storage issues that we've had. And we keep all of our documents that way.
So you said all the retirement stuff's done.
All of our retirement stuff. So
So if somebody came in and said, hey, I worked here such and such, you can look it up on the
well, if you
computer.
had an active, let me clarify.
Oh.
If you had an active retirement file, we have all those. Let me give an example. So if somebody was, let's talk about vested participants. If you were a vested participant, unless there was some type of payroll record for you, I don't have anything. It would actually be our conversion of our actual physical records that we had. So for Miss Poulin, going forward, she will have what's a retirement file as a vested participant. But if you're asking me all the others, I wouldn't have anything on those. But anybody moving forward, we will create or have, or the retirement files that we had in our actual possession. And I will, the board asked for me to provide the listing and tell you who's receiving a check. I should be able to get that for you by the next meeting. That'll give you an idea of the numbers. But we had quite a few retirement files in our possession, probably about 2, 3, 4 drawer cabinets. And we didn't distinguish between you getting a check, or we probably also actually, right, wrong, or indifferent, we probably do have some deceased files in there, because if somebody had passed away and we were giving them something, whatever file we had, we just gave it to DOMA. Did I answer your question, or talking too much? Or maybe a combination of both.
Maybe me. So I guess what I'm asking, and I'll try it again, if Joe Smith comes in and says, yeah, I worked here, such, retired, you can look it up right there on the computer, and so there's no, okay. All right, and if we either have it or we don't, and it'll be on the computer. Okay, that's all.
Literally speaking, if I wanted to, I could actually do it from this smartphone really quick and go and take a look. But yes, it's that quick. You
Okay.
look, we have, we can search by your name, partial of your name. We can do Social Security number. For a lot of our files, we've moved towards employee number. So we're able to do it all those different ways, and it just shows you all the files that we have on record.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
All right.
So we're getting there. We're almost there.
So you want to, again, postpone that till we have all the verbiage perhaps from
Well, I don't know what the
DOMA
cost is, and
Right.
quite frankly, this is old stuff. So some of it you need to be able to get your fingers on, and some of it is person has died, are we
It's
really going to need
archival.
that? Right, and so it's basically that we could just put it in a box and store. But minutes of meetings and policies and how we change policies, I think that's important to have and be able to search pretty easily, because you never know what kind of lawsuit you might get or anything.
You'll put that
It's-
in the policy with a differentiation between the-
Contracts that we have, and you want it in one place so you could search it pretty easily. I don't see it being huge, but it's still, there's something there.
So
So
it's
we'll get back with you on
still in flux.
an actual cost, because this actually is the retirement board's responsibility, and it should
Right.
probably come from the retirement system as a cost for that.
Are we ready to move on to the experience study update?
Right. I wanted to go through, because it does say in our code that we do a 5-year experience study. And Eleanor Stewart, who works for John Hancock, who's our actuary, the code calls for an experience study, the retirement system, every 5 years. However, the size of the plans would not support such a demographic analysis. As is the case with all but the largest pension plans, the total population of the retirement systems are not large to yield a statistical credibility with respect to mortality. And so note that the funding valuation reflects the mortality table required by the IRS for corporate plans. We anticipate this table will be updated in 2018 to reflect the most recent available mortality data. As with total population, so you do a 5-year study on your mortality, but you also do it on your population. So our active population is only 40 employees, so it's not large enough to generate a credible experience data for retirement, termination, or disability. However, given that the active participants, less than 5% of liability, any change to these assumptions would have a negligible effect. So even if a few of those 40, we gave them 50% pay raises, it's not going to really affect the total costs. Note that the economic assumptions, such as investment return and inflation, are reviewed on an annual basis. So a 5-year study is usually your population and your mortality. Annually, you always do the investments, and so we don't need one, even though that's in code that we should have one every 5 years. That was more for years ago.
So does he perhaps want us to officially waive this specific year's 5-year
Right.
experience study? Anybody else have any feelings? I certainly understand how the data would not negligibly affect one thing or the other. So do we need a motion to say that we're going to waive the experience study this year? Or-
Can I ask something? Who does this experience study?
It's the actual.
Actuary.
Okay, and that's over and above our contract with them anyway, right?
I think it's inclusive
It's
of-
included.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no cost
There's
associated
no
with it.
experience to study because you have the population,
Right.
which is very small. And so if you had an open system where all the employees are part of the population, the past 5 years, we haven't gotten any pay raises. So the assumptions every annual year is usually a 3% pay raise or 3% increase in salary, let's just say it that way. Because it's not just pay raises, it's new people coming in and old people. But if you don't have an active population, you don't need to study it. You only have 40 people. And there's really not much change, so there's no need to study. Mortalities, you could study that, but what he's saying is you have the IRS mortality table, and that really, there's not as much. Our population's only 1,000 people, and it's not much to study anyway.
I don't disagree. I was just thinking, I don't know that we'd need one in 5 years from now, based on that information.
I think we need to change the code, actually, but I think being that's still in the code,
Yeah.
we need to at least vote that we're not going to do it for the reasons stated.
I make a motion, we don't do it.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? So we're going to waive this specific one. And then, I know Matthew needs to leave real quickly. Do we want to skip over the recap for a minute and do the travel expense approval? We would still have a quorum, but that should be a real quick and dirty thing that we can do. Did everybody have a chance to look at it? It's the very last sheet in your packet.
front and back. Alice's is on the front, mine's on the back.
So do I have a motion to approve their expense to go to that conference?
Make a motion to approve it.
Second.
Second by Crutcher. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and none opposed. All right, now we can go into the recap for those that are able to stay and just hear a little bit of what you all gleaned from your conference.
You go first. I didn't realize we were doing this.
I was able to attend both days. I learned a few things. It was very interesting. They actually sent out by email the PowerPoints for all of the different
Sessions.
Yes, sessions, thank you. Some of them do not apply to us because of the size of our group, but some of them, one that I found interesting was just a discussion about how we need to make sure we don't look at how are we doing right now. We need to look, what is this investment going to do in 7 years, in 10 years? It said that basically people look at the short term, and that's not where we need to look. And yeah, I know that sometimes we've been looking at, oh, gee, what did we do this year? Well, we only made 6%. Yeah, but this investment over the next 5 years is going to generate more like 7.5 up to 8%. And that one I found very interesting to make sure we look further out. Like I said, a couple of them just, and I do not remember exactly, but a couple of them just didn't apply to us. I do have in my office a copy of our plan as compared to all of the other ones. I did make some good contacts. There is one area that's going out, I want to say it's Fairfax, maybe? She said they were actually putting out an RFP for a new investment advisor within the next few months, and I did ask her to please, when they put out theirs, if she could please send it to me because we'd like to be able to use it as an example. A couple of questions that we had about, who pays for certain things like the work that the actuary does for GASB 67 and 68, which is something we have to have in our CAFR every year. John Hancock was saying that the plan doesn't pay for that it's the city that pays for it. And I asked everybody there, and every single person there said, oh no, their plan pays for that. So that was something that was a question that going there and getting that information and being able to ask these questions of others was very beneficial.
Okay. Alice, did you have anything else?
I think there was a lot of good presentations on investments and to keep your eyes open for investments. They did a name that color, and it was a slideshow of just different colors, and they said name the color that the color is written in. So if you had the word red, it might be blue. So you had to think about it. And so one of the comments, I guess, was, that just because an investment looks good, you have to really think about what you're doing and the risk you're taking. And it was kind of an interesting game, but it just was it was Sunday afternoon. I mean, it was a beautiful day out. You're like, I'm sitting here in this conference room, so it was kind of cute to do that. And then I think also it's important to see the size of our plan compared to others that are closed. Most of the 8 localities that have these systems are closed. There's 1 or 2 that are still open. Richmond's partially opened. And it was important, I think, to see the comparison, and I think we need to send that out to everybody. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was on the list.
That's okay.
I would have had that comparison on there because our investment return is 7.25%, and most of the other localities are higher than that. Norfolk is lower, VRS is lower, but almost everybody else is either 7.25% or higher. And, you see and you hear everybody saying that our investment return should be lower, and that's not going to, but you have to think not just the next 5 years, you have to think 40 years or, 30
Right.
years out. So one of the things that I'd like our new investment advisor firm, whoever they be, start looking at, we have a closed system now. How does that investment strategy change as our assets decline and as we need to have more money out of it? And even as we were talking with Greystone and as they were making these changes, one of the things that they hadn't put in there first, and I asked them to do that, and it is in our investment transition, is how we're going to pay for the benefits going out the door. Every month we pay $2.5 million. We need to make sure we have cash. And I think you brought up the New York Life, that was supposed to be a money market, and it really wasn't. It was
Right.
an insurance
It was-
product.
yeah, it doesn't-
And I think Greystone was able to tell us, hey, get out of this now
Right.
before interest rates go. We still need to make sure we have cash flow, and we're doing it with the minimum number of fees and transactions and things like that. So, and fee and how much you're paying in fees is a very hot topic right now. California, the CalPERS is always asking about that because you give it to a money manager, and John Hancock is now sending us on our quarterly reports, shows us each basis points. And so Greystone is showing us the percentage that we're paying for these management of our funds. So I think that's very important to look at. It's not just how much you get as a return, how much you're paying for that return. So, it's
Okay.
interesting.
We were at 8% when I first got on the board,
Yes.
and that's when we were 20-some% funded before the pension bonds, and we had just come out of a recession where the investments weren't doing that well also.
Sure.
So that's something that we feel like we had to do as a board to
No,
get.
it's a good conservative strategy, 7.25. I wasn't knocking it. I'm just saying that we're there where we
Right.
should be. Some people are even going lower, and I think one time somebody suggested 6.25.
Right.
That's not realistic. I think we will make more than 7. Oh, in the long term. But it's
Right.
just- you can't just look at 1 year.
Right.
Okay, if there's any other business before the board? If not, could I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
That's a tied second there. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, y'all have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go enjoy Harbor Fest or whatever they have.
I'll be in Atlantic City.
Parade of sales. We're going everywhere. We're going to go hang out with you.